Hello everyone, and welcome to my acrylic painting demonstration. And today I'm looking at Basilica Cistern and its gorgeous light. This is Istanbul. I'm really interested to explore color today and the contrast between orange-red colors and the most beautiful emerald greens and turquoise colors. So I picked up the background for my painting using the main orange color so that I can build up on its tones and then work with the nuances of color. Now on my palette, I have a group of warm colors. So I have cadmium yellow, ochre, orange, crimson, and violet. I've got plenty of white, and then also some cool colors, emerald green and phthalo blue. I'm going to start with a sketch. I also have a sample color here, so I can test some of the colors. I can test how the orange background will start reacting to my colors. So for example, if I want to sketch in using the violet, I can test it against my background. That will be quite a good connection to the colors. I can also sketch using my crimson, which we'll see well as well. I think I might start with the crimson. It's a little bit lighter tone, then I can increase its darkness as I go. So, or combination of both colors will be fine as well. So let's dilute it slightly here, as long as I can see it as I'm sketching. Right. So let's look at the perspective of the view here. We have a backdrop of the distant wall of the Basilica Cistern and the repetitive arches. Something similar I was painting recently in one of the previous classes. The left-hand side of the columns, kind of that wall of the columns, is slightly open to us, so we can see little gaps between the column spaces. When on the right-hand side, the columns are really close together, except perhaps the last one. So it will be much sharper lines of perspective on the right-hand side and a little bit wider opening on the left-hand side. So first of all, I need to find out where I want to have that furthest away arch space be placed. Now I can try to make a more or less exactly the same image as a photograph, but also want to make my own response to it, and I want to have perhaps exaggerate some of the shapes and really work into the colors and elongated shapes. So I'm going to perhaps slightly change the proportions deliberately. So let's find that space. If I were to look approximately for the base of that distant wall, it gives me much larger space proportionally for the top of the painting in comparison to the bottom. So it's not halfway through, it's already, that gives me kind of the link of how far that space is going to be. Now, where I'd like to have the space to be more close to the left, or close to the left, or close to the right, that's where I probably want to have slight change. If this is halfway through my painting, perhaps just on the right-hand side of it, I think that might be a good idea of placing my my shape. So perhaps somewhere here I'll use a sponge as a rubber. I can easily remove lines I don't want or correct lines while they're still damp. Okay. So let's find this positioning or in this space. Okay, might tweak it later, but let's start from this space. Perhaps a little bit shorter. Again, we'll see how that develops. And it immediately gives me a reflection of the same space. Okay. What I'd like to do next is to perhaps just bring some of the vertical lines, because the columns are placed so close on both sides. It's hard to draw every individual one unless we're really looking at something really close. So if I have a rhythm of lines staying quite close together in the far end and getting closer and closer, wider and wider at the front, that's give me an overall guidance. It doesn't mean that any of those specific lines will be attached to the columns yet. Okay, I'm also going to continue my horizon line, where it's not the horizon line. This is going to be my floor line, or the distant floor line. The actual horizon line will be where all my perspective lines stop. So if I were to continue I think they might be very close to that, or they might be even on that wall line as well. I think we might be into something here. So if I were to plan this angle quite sharp, and this one will be much shallower. So I'll look for the tops of the columns as an approximate guide. Okay. I'll look perhaps at that angle here, maybe a little bit further. Okay, so I'm using light pink lines, so then I can use that color perhaps to correct things, or perhaps not make it too intrusive. And the other line, so I'm looking at the tops of the columns, roughly where those tops of the columns are going to be. Okay. And that gives me an approximate direction. They look a little bit similar, so perhaps if I were slightly, we're only talking about slight, that makes a difference. Increasing the angle. Okay. And for the next stage, I need to mirror these lines. Okay, that might need to go further in here. So they're not going to be in the center of that line, and that edge might be going. I continued here. I think it's, yeah, it is just somewhere a little bit higher than my floor line. If I'll find one of the points, let's say by the columns, and connect it, I can make that judgment without perspective line. So where perhaps if this is going to be my largest column at the front, where the base is going to be, and if I were to connect that corner, that will give me the reflection, the bases of my other columns. Then I can tweak how much space I want to keep between those two shapes. That's the only space I'm going to have. The rest columns will be staying on that line. Okay, that will give me a guide for it later. So if I'll stop for the moment on this side and continue an opposite line, an opposite side. Okay, just tweaking that direction. And the same, the column of a similar level is not fitted. I can just about see the back of is almost like a square shape, which is lit up under the water. Okay, so it's that back of that column I can see. It only needs for the guidance. It doesn't have to be there perfectly. I'm just gonna roughly compare that space. Okay, I think I'm quite happy with that. Okay, and that might give me that connection of line as well. Another comparison I can make is the two columns, the next set of columns. They will be on the same line, and I can decide how far this is going to be offset. That's where this space is going to start. Approximately of a similar width. Okay, if I start drawing a tall shape, I can then tweak where the top is going to be, that bulky decorative area. And again, that will connect with my right hand side column. Just double check it's all here. Perhaps even drop it tiny bit lower so we see more decoration and a little more of the archway. Perhaps tiny bit lower than that as well. I'll plan it here. It's quite a large part here. Okay, and that will give me a little extra space for the upcoming, only a small amount of the arch, but I think that will be quite a good connection. Got part of that column coming towards us as well, and quite a lot of heavy decoration. Okay, So it's quite pale tones so far here. Once I'll be happy with it, I can start adding slightly darker colors, especially for some of the shapes in the shadow. So it'd be quite nice to draw in tone. And work into some of the shadows. Okay, and just a little bit of connection here as well. Now these columns are got a similar design, but different parts have been combined from different style columns because they came from different parts of Turkish Empire. Well, the Constantinople, the Roman Empire first, sorry. If I were to be true to the history details. Okay, so that's that width. And we'll have a round, so we've got two sides almost like squarish in diameter, square in diameter tops, but we have much round, not much, a round column, so we can see the sides, but we also see the oval on the top. Okay, so that's there, and these shapes are a little bit more straight comparison to the softer corners of the other column. Okay, that's okay. Just want to make sure they appear in symmetrical. Okay, and that's one's coming here. Looking at some shadows as a basic form. Okay, now I was happy to do a little extra details to establish my key columns. Now I'm going to be a little bit more attentive to other areas. So for example, let's find on the left hand side, we can see probably another 2-3 columns and the gaps between them. So if I were to place, I might paint straight away the darknesses of the columns and see the shapes together. I might swap a brush. So I can draw with tone straight away. If I use diluted violet, then if there are any mistakes, I can paint over in a darker color, in a darker tone. So my orange background already could be seen as a medium darkness. So I'm introducing a little extra strength of tone. If the lines for the columns are not going to be perfectly straight at this stage, it's not a big deal. I can work with that afterwards. I can correct that strength, that straightness later. Now my reflections will be slightly darker. We tend to have reflections or less clear or slightly darker, so they do vary from what above. But in some cases it's more or less a similar color, so that's okay to bear it in mind as well. So for the next column, I want to draw just a line, just a wider line. I can decide on its width, so add to that width. I prefer to make it slightly narrower so I can make the adjustments. It's easier to make something narrower, but wider than narrow it down. Okay, this column is very dark, probably made out of very different material. Okay. Perhaps there is less light on it as well. As the light is quite artistically placed. Okay. Looks a little bit wider than I wanted, but I know I can widen the columns to compensate and make them more much correct. Okay. So I identified where my columns start, but I haven't worked out where my base tops of the column is going to be. So I'm almost there. Okay, and that's going to be somewhere here as well. Looks a little too similar. I think that's where we need to go slightly steeper, slightly sharper, lower down. Perhaps this will go a tiny bit more wider as well. Okay, trying to visually recognizing the shapes for now. Drawing with stone. Okay, and the rest of the columns will follow. Okay, and then we'll be playing with the light as the color develops. So perhaps if I were to paint the back wall slightly darker. Okay. And before I start drawing the columns or identifying them as big shapes, I'm confident and happy to do the closest here column. Perhaps we'll work on its light later, but its presence is quite dominant. I'll work into its subtones and subshadows on it later. And I also want to make this close to me column even darker. Okay, not massively darker, but just slightly darker for now. Still quite enjoy seeing that transparency. Okay, perhaps something there. And now I want to find the arches of in that corridor. So the first arch we'll see is in this space. So if I find the columns which hold it and the tops, okay, that will give me the space to work in between. Okay, it's quite a round arch, quite not overly elongated. I think I might drop the spaces just to extend. I quite like the volume for the ceiling left. Might even drop it a little bit lower because what we can see are the gentle connections of the bricks constructing that ceiling. The space the arch creates is slightly lower. You can see more of that shape above it. This area, smudged area, got some lovely color. You will see it better once this area dried, so there wouldn't be much reflections on the paint, and it's a lovely subtone. Okay, so that's a bit much dramatic change to columns, decorative areas, and then we also can see the arch going in between the two columns. When here everything's going to just stay dark. It's going to be a nice darker shadow. Just double checking them. Okay, tiny bit higher. Space, and also where that column, how much of that column is protruding. Okay, perhaps I took it a little too far out. As well. Okay. That elongated space. Of the arch. Just double checking its location. Okay, maybe this one's just need to go a little across. Can't see much of that space, that line. It's more of the connection to the space here. Okay. Feels like I need to make it slightly taller. Just want to make sure the first shape is working for me before I work into this the arches. Okay, I think that's better. Now, just to make the difference between the spaces bit of the columns, I think I might just need to move my back wall tiny bit further. It's not going to change anything here, just a little elongated space here, but this line might just go a little sharper. Okay, it actually doesn't come to the top, it comes up to where the columns go. Okay, so this is double checking that space. And that's where that space is going to work. Okay, good. That's still fine, and that's still good as well. It doesn't affect my first arch, but will start affecting other arches. Actually, this space, this capital of the column stands out in comparison to the column itself. So I think I've got an extra room. Okay, made it slightly darker, just to see. It's actually a very light capital there. Some light for the lower part of that capital. Okay. Just double checking those spaces as well. Okay, now let's find the next column, the next space. I think that's where the width of the space will slightly different, will be slightly varying. I think I'll move that one slightly closer. And move this column slightly further towards the center. Okay, this one there, this one's going to be here. And then the super dark one's going to be over here. Okay, good. And that will give my arch extra strength. And then that space is going to be here as well. Okay. loads of lines in this area. Some of them already dry, so I might turn it to a tone so I can paint it later in a block of color. Now let's look at the other arches. We have the further distance, maybe a little higher. Tiny bit more pointy. That's it. Just gonna make this back wall slightly darker so my eyes see the new space rather than the old bland area for it. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my round brush again and sketch a number of quick arches, yeah, to give me the feel for the space. And the same here. I want to have an impression of the light. I'm interested into that combination of light. So the exact positioning of arches is less of importance to me. But again, as we're earlier on working in this area, that would be good to see how the columns build up. Okay. Checking out that space. Perhaps I can move this column just tiny bit more close, but going to leave it as it is for now. Okay. And what I am interested in before I start introducing color is the connection of those corridors. So this corridor continues, and there's another similar corridor on the left and a similar corridor on the right. So if I'll build those arches and spaces, that's gone a little too steep very quickly. Okay. Perhaps even this one could be seen somewhere there. Might just see a glimpse of some of those lines. If not on this side, it's might see it here. And I'm interested to find what else could be spotted in the distance. So I guess that will be the column of this level. Where's its capital? And that light will lead again here. It's light, it's perspective, it's connection. Some more space of light developing there as well. Okay, that's will be quite good. Right, I think I've probably had enough of drawing. Don't want to go further into the smaller details. That structure at the front giving me plenty of information, but let's just top up some tone, some darkness. I'm going to let that dry, and then I can start working with thicker paint and establishing more shapes. Here we have quite a lot of light, but the darkness of tone is more solid, close to the front. Okay, when the darkness on the columns, I think, developing slowly upwards. There will be more light in this area where at the moment I have a shadow. So I'll keep a mental note for that. And there is some lovely darkness at the back wall, or something is quite dark behind here. This front column got extra beautiful shadow, so it's good to top up that shadow. And also some lovely shadows formed. Okay, somewhere here, and it's links to the water. We're gonna too far, maybe just a little bit too far. There's some sort of anchor point, a little bit more here, and perhaps just over this side. Again, I can tweak it more with color. And now if I'll get the general shapes, it will give me that reference point, seeing the darker silhouettes. I'll make decisions if shapes need to be readjusted. Okay, and that will link to the shadows here. Some of my earlier tones are drying out lighter. It's not a big deal. I can top them up as well as I'll work into them later. Just comparing the shapes, comparing some of the silhouettes visually. I'm squinting my eyes to see the shapes better. Okay, that arch is there, and I can see actually this part of the arch. Stronger that line is, a much lighter faint line. Okay, now I can make that connection. Okay. Okay, there's some more shadows, but I think it's will help me if I were to work in more solid color there. So my drawing and my tonal breakdown, might just connect a tiny bit of the shadow, and then after that this will be finished. So it's that space. 1, 2, it's the third arch. 1, 2, it's the third arch. There we go. And this one's got a little more extra darkness over it. Right, and let's start getting the colors on my brushes. Now, the first more solid colors I'd like to use will be the warm colors, and not far from a similar orange I already have, but I want to have a small changes introduced first before I go for dramatic change of darkness and change of color. So I'm mixing orange with some white first, just to place a couple of strokes to find some much lighter areas, so I can offset that against it. So for example, if I want to paint some more shadows here and some bolder lights, green lights, I think it's perhaps a little bolder orange. That's why I need to have that check of judgment. Similar. Okay, that's a bit more gentler tone. I'll let this one dry and I'll perhaps touch it up again. So we have some light under the arches. Gives me an opportunity to think of that light, think of the widths, correct perhaps some of the arches. But I want to think of shapes now. As much as I'd like to say that the architecture here is perfect, there's so many inconsistencies where the different gaps between shapes are different. There is different. The system is applied the same, but the little not quite equal shapes applied, and we can only see it by seen shapes of color, of darkness, of slightly different texture. Okay, I'm just coming close to where my actually back wall is going to be. And again, it doesn't have to stay that bright in color, but it will cover my mistakes and give me a little better connection of shapes first. Okay, there's some bolder light here. So far I'm going for a similar light because I'm tidying things up. This is where the fun begins. Okay, some of these shapes will be lovely and bold. Okay, I think this color is settling slightly better, although the shapes in the center are wet, so they're reflecting lighter on the screen. I'll paint the whole space. It might be easier to subdivide it later. Also find little inconsistencies of my columns being not overly straight. So for example, this space needs trimming at the bottom. Okay, that light will follow through to some exciting greens eventually. And some of these ceilings. So some of those arches also come to play its role. And following the shapes of light. And that's always better than line. have a little more bolder light. There will be some greens in this area, but I just want to see a little bit of warmth as a backdrop for it. It almost will be a semi-fluorescent light. I want it shimmering a little here. I think there's some texture on them, on the columns there. Okay, anything else in between? And as I'm painting, some of my strokes are quite diluted, so they settling in much more smoother. But it means that I have to come back to sharpen some of those areas as well. Mm. That's that lighter capital I've overpainted in dark. Okay, so a little light is introduced. Little space is now defined. And I'll be trying to look for more and more nuances for the light here, for the variety of color. Don't want to make these shapes like ribs. You might want to have that extra range of color range of okay, that's a little better. And perhaps I'll come back with some darker tones as well. So the shape is more standing out on its own, which is lovely. Okay, just double checking it's a straight line. Mm. Right, anything else on the ceiling? I think I'm gonna go for slightly stronger red, so I can blend some of the color with existing background, but also create some shadows. Okay, I think this area, I might come back to it in a moment. It needs some darkness, but maybe not so strong. Also, I want some darkness through the use of violet and crimson. A very subtle darkness. Okay, that's not much difference. Okay, that's a bit better. As this corner of the storyboard will start drying, you will see the shape slightly better. I'm gonna have a tiny bit of light in the center here. Okay, doesn't quite show that difference. Only small changes in the center here. I want to make it, that's way too bright. I want to make it exciting to look at. I want to have the feel of the bricks texture, which the ceiling is made of. So all I'm doing is mixing my crimson with some violet, or crimson and some orange, and trying to establish subtones here. Perhaps it's might be too much details for the top, and especially if it's harder for you to see on the screen, I'm going to persevere. Yeah, you can see it much more here. Very, very gentle tonal adjustments. The whole painting has is constructed on that small variations of tones, subtones, and I have to be very patient before I add the cool colors. I need to prepare my surface for it. Okay. Now violet is settling now into some of these background colors. Violet and orange could work really, really well together, or could clash really badly. So if I'm mixing the violet and red as in between color, between violet and orange, red will balance it a bit more. Right, a little more solid darkness without having anything transparent. Column's got beautiful marble markings, light catching slightly uneven surfaces, so they're not just perfect in tone. That's constantly changing. I think this column needs a slightly wider base. There's interior widening behind it as well, so it reads together initially before it starts separating into another shape. These dark markings on the columns, that's where different parts been combined, and they don't correspond to any other markings, because it doesn't mean that, very likely they have a similar kind of height, but they don't, because they're slowly going lower and lower, but it doesn't mean that these ones have got a similar height connection segments. Okay, now I can start working into some of these more solid darks. Just widening some of the lines. Well, I've got some colour handy, and that just looks blank. I'm also just watching how this area drying before making further the structures with stone. Okay, that shadow needs to blend with the orange. Perhaps I need to have a lighter brush and a darker brush so I can tweak things as I go. It's the moment that orange to the violet becomes a nasty brown rather than that lovely zesty orange background. Maybe I just simply need to use a clean brush to blend. I think that will be better. Just blend it with that beautiful orange background color. Okay, maybe that's what I should have been doing here as well. Not, I'll come back to my original bold orange and just reintroduce it and then blend it over some of the shadows. And the color is transparent. It doesn't cover the surface well. We need to wait for it to dry or paint a thicker layer, or it will not make any sense. It will actually be disrupting the surface. and direct crimson with whatever's left on my brush. This area definitely needs some fresh lighter color, as I have painted it dark to try to find the form. Okay, and this area needs correction as well. I've just dried some of the colors so we can see them without being reflected. I quite like that glow of the reds. And I think next step is to start getting a little more darkness for some of my lower columns. And then probably start a little bit introducing and checking out my cooler colors. So to help with my darker tones, I can work with violet, but if I wanted anything darker than violet, but not to have the just direct, strong violet in it, I can use a little bit of green to compensate and to kind of to cool off the heat in the violet. I'll just do a little bit more work with this color. This is quite nice. Still perhaps a little more darkness. So that's where adding a little dab of emerald green. And that extra darkness. Okay, that's a little reflecting again. I think that's will start coming through. That's paint reds. Not going to reflect. And some stronger violet here as well. And that weight. Concentrate in this area, it's even darker tones. Perhaps even red and green. Those are opposite colors and will give me a solid black-like tone. I do like seeing a little color. So presence of violet here and there is better than just having a solid darkness. Okay, that's good. Let's check it's right in comparison to other groups of darkness. Maybe this one need to touch the column rather than giving it a little shine. And now I'm looking at the photograph for some ideas of light appearances. But I will start to tweak my own changes of that light shadow variety. So now my painting will start helping me with that suggestion, the existing colors and tones. Okay, that shadow could be increased. The column looks slightly wobbly. I think I'll tidy it up with some cleaner color on the side at a later time. Darker reflection than the actual ceiling. Perhaps I can add a small link, but I have lightened that area after I've darkened it a couple of times, so it's obviously doesn't suit there to be too solid dark. Okay, and keep moving to other shapes and changing the colors. Okay, how about this column? Got some lovely presence in it, but I think it still go slightly darker. The beautiful lighting of some sort of flame beams. I think that highlight is covered, looks better. I really like that contrast here, so I might increase the darkness. Okay, that's good. This one's dried lighter than I wanted. So it's shadows now. A dramatic addition of shadows make a difference in showing the drama. Okay, this looks a little too strong now. All the other areas need to be lightened up, or something in that area need to be less bold. United silhouette of a shadow. Any tonal changes, but more, a little more different color. I worked with my shadows. Let's work with the medium darknesses again. Now, on top of reflection in the surface of the water, there are also the stones of the floor, which I have been ignoring for the moment, but I'd like to start looking at them as well. Right, let's have a little bit more orangey red. Okay, need some more cleaner color. So I need to take my violet off the brush to create the cleaner color. So orange red, perhaps a bit of yellow, dab of white. Okay, this solid wall. And I haven't done as much coverage for the walls on this side. So the shiny areas stay below, but all of this one need to have that tone slightly darker. And even darker here. Because that's sets off beautifully against the dark marks, against some orangey tones. But here we have a lot of light, but not enough subtones. Again, need to be a little bit more patient to wait for it to dry. Yeah, I'm really liking the glow here. So this column needs to dry before I can add more highlights there. For the glow to continue, really want that. Present. We'll try to break some monotonous space here. There are loads of elongated shapes. It's very much tonal painting so far. Just a little bit going towards coolness of the violet and extra warmth of the red, or moving towards the yellows, but I'm mainly looking at tones. Let's go for some more orange. orangey yellows. Again, the pattern of middle tone, but more on the lighter side middle tone. Going to exaggerate some of the light for my arches. Otherwise that light is not glowing through. Have a little dry brush stroke here in the center. So if I'll clean the brush. Okay, maybe I'll stop at that and find some cooler color now. Just little references of light here. Reflective surface. And I can come back at a later date to tweak some of mid-tones and tweak some of the details of those reds. Now I'm much happier with overall structure and overall breakdown of the tones. So let's focus on another task, and then we'll be able to see the shapes better and in the evaluated state. The colors will dry as well and have more clear color to what it's going to look like. Okay, let's do that. So let's just dry the existing layers because I need to see the cooler colors coming on the dry background. I've just touched up tiny bit of the areas with some violet mixed with some white, and it's just given me that in between color from the reds and browns and that solid violet blacky looking to moving on to the cool colors. So now I'll start using some ultramarine and some turquoise colors. I think if I use white and, sorry, not ultramarine, emerald green, sorry. If I'll use direct emerald green and white and find some strong highlights of it. Okay, it looks quite beautiful, but maybe not light enough. So dark enough, can't see the color, just can see a whitish line. So let's give that one a quick wipe on a darker tone. I want to see those varieties. Okay, it's not showing again because perhaps it's slightly white. It's strange, it shows very dark color on against my white palette, and a very whitish on the orange. So let's see. Okay, perhaps tiny tweak. I thought persevere. Unfortunately, my screen doesn't quite want to pick that strong green. Okay. If I make now turquoise color, let's find, there was a corner of light somewhere here a while ago. See that light well. Show almost like underwater. Depths. And that corner. And show nice glow of light for the column here. A little bit of light. Slightly larger lit up area behind the column here. Beautiful. Connection of light here. Need to go slightly lighter. Yeah, unfortunately the screen doesn't pick up that beautiful color the moment I make it lighter. I'll persevere and photograph it for you later to show the actual colors. I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing with a darker turquoise. So mix my ultramarine and phthalo blue. I'm going to wipe most of the paint off. I want to try some dry brushing. To show the texture of the underwater stones. Okay, perhaps a little too light. Perhaps if I were to dilute my color and come out with wet texture. Because I'm painting over dark surface, I know it will dry much more darker, and it's not going to stand out as strongly. So I'm going to persevere, but with the wet strokes. Just perhaps in this area. And a little hint of perspective lines to show the stones on the bottom that they are going in perspective here as well. Okay. Any extra light for the distance. A strong yellow light has a connection with emerald green light as well. Just careful removing thicker lines to make the shapes a bit more careful here. Need to remain straight. Didn't like that shape of dark. It's been on my radar for a while. This is a bit bold light. So the dry brushing might be more useful. Smudge of the dry brushing will give that a little extra hint of the more settled version of color. Right, I need to be careful not to start over dabbing or over introducing the same color in similar quantities. I'm squinting my eyes. I'm really focusing now. That's why I'm going quiet, because the concentration is increasing. Those decisions are based on what's in front of me. slightly messy, fine details here that not quite given the justice of the distance. Got an impression, but perhaps I'm not giving too much careful attention here. And perhaps maybe some of the last strokes if I connect some of that water. Quite happy how this shapes dried. Not too intrusive, but it does show the water stillness of it. Mhm. Just looking, skimming through the light, skimming through the shadows, checking shapes. I know I could probably work further and further into more details without over busying them, but it will take time to look into them. Perhaps a little fresh view on the picture will be also welcome. Let's try a little greener stroke here. Yeah, and I might stop at that for today. A lot of thinking coming into this area, loads of connection of light and shadows. Really exciting, but I think there's still quite a little more work. So I've broken loads of shapes down into nuances. Perhaps I need to unite some of them a little more. So my new color is not just peppered through the areas, but I'm on the right track. So thank you very much for being with me tonight. And I hope you might give it a go just to get some of the colors mixed, maybe to get some of the tonal decisions Maybe you might want to follow one of the columns from top to bottom and do a little portrait of a column. Maybe you want to look at some of the reflections and kind of the build-up of those arches. Doesn't have to be a finished piece. It might be just the playfulness of light and color combinations. So thank you very much for today, and I hope to see you in the future soon. Bye bye.